Well, good evening. I am glad you decided to spend a little bit of time with me today. Some of you will be joining me here live this evening. Some of you will be joining me through some of my social media platforms where this video will be posted later. But however you're joining, whether it's live or whether it's in a post that'll be up when this is over. I'm glad you're with me. Um, when you enter, I'd appreciate it if in the comments, if you're comfortable with it, if in the comments you would let me know where you're checking in from. Always interested in knowing that. And over the course of the evening here, the next hour or so, as we're walking through some things, if you have comments or you have questions, feel free to post those in the comments here. I'm interested in knowing what you feel about what I'm saying and how you relate to what I'm saying. Hey, Blast, it's good to see you here tonight, man. I will just let you know if anybody else jumps in from Florida this evening. My buddy Blass, who's here with us, is probably the best dog trainer in the state of Florida. And you need to reach out to him if you need some assistance with your animal. Best that there is. So, a couple things as we get started tonight. In the past, I have had guests occasionally on the live here with me. We took a break from that through the winter and through the holiday, but that's going to be starting back up beginning in March. Coming up here over the next few months, we will, I have an expert, a woman that will be with me that is an expert on trauma. She'll be here to talk about trauma, how we respond to trauma, how our body reacts to trauma, a definition of trauma. And I think she'll be talking a little bit about some tools we can use to help when we're experiencing dysregulation. I have coming up in a couple of months, I have a police officer that will be here with us. We'll have a discussion about how addiction pertains to, sorry, let me turn my do not disturb on. I got all kinds of notifications kicking up here all at once. But I have a police officer that'll be on here with me in the near future. He will be here to talk about the connection between addiction and crime. And he'll also be talking specifically about addiction and homelessness. He plays a role, a part of his role with the police department that he works for is to interact directly with the homeless community in the city where he works. We'll have that coming up. And then hopefully in a couple of months, we will have a pastor and a member from his congregation that leads a recovery group in his church. And they'll be here to discuss the role that the church can play in the recovery community and really the responsibility that I think is present there for the church in recovery. And for some of us that have been in recovery, the church hasn't always been something that we saw as a safe place. And so we're going to be talking about that. and what that can look like and what that should look like. Now, tonight, our topic is when the world feels unsafe and staying grounded in recovery. We're going to talk a little bit of brain science this evening and about how our brain is built to desire safety. A specific part of our brain is actually designed to look for danger, and how that causes dysregulation. What's a healthy response that we can have there? What's the role that search for safety plays in our behavior and possibly in relapse? And so, let me start with a few questions for you tonight. Have you noticed, I don't think I'm the only one, but have you noticed how tense people feel lately? And we see this in all kinds of areas. There's all kinds of tension in the news, stress in the news, politics. Politics are downright hostile now. Social media. I was just kind of glancing through my social media feed and seeing all the conflict and confrontation. There seems to be family conflict today. And even small things seem to be amped up and seem to be bigger just across the board. And so here's what I want to present to you tonight, and a starting point for what we're going to be talking about. And it's the idea that our brain is wired to scan for danger. There's actually a system in our brain, I don't know if you're aware of this or not, that the sole purpose of this system, this particular system in our brain, is to scan for danger and things that we would experience as not being safe. This part of our brain is not designed to scan for truth. It's not designed to scan for nuance. It is specifically focused on danger, things that can cause us harm. And so, if you seem to be operating lately from a sense of anxiety, stress, feeling like life is out of control, here's what I want to tell you. That doesn't necessarily mean that anything is wrong with you. What's actually happening, what may be happening, is that your nervous system is just doing its job. It's just doing what it's designed to do. Now, here's the problem. Our nervous system can't tell the difference. It's looking for danger. It is a built-in self-preservation mechanism. It's designed to help keep us alive, to look for things that could harm us. The problem is that this self-defense mechanism, this built-in self-defense mechanism in our brain, can't tell the difference between a saber-toothed tiger and a moron on social media that's selling conspiracy theories. It sees both of those things as danger and as threat. And in a lot of ways, it responds in the same way to both of those things. And we're going to be talking about some of that here tonight. And I'm going to try to keep this simple. I'm going to try to keep it understandable, but I do think it's important for us to understand Now, there's a part of our brain, maybe you have heard about this before. It's called the amygdala. And the amygdala in our brain is a type of alarm system. The way that I kind of like to paint pictures in my head for things. And as a kid, I loved watching movies with submarines, or there used to be most of you won't remember this, but there used to be a TV show that was on every week called Voyage to the Bottom of the Sea. And it was about a high-tech, futuristic submarine. And I like thinking about alarm systems with that. I think about people there in the control room in the submarine, and you've got that sonar ping that's going out, that's looking for things that are out there that might be a threat or might be dangerous for that submarine. And that's kind of how our amygdala operates. Our amygdala is constantly sending out this ping that's looking for threats in our environment around us, things that might cause us harm, things that might hurt us. Now, here's where the problem comes in. While it's scanning for danger and for threat, and that's what it's supposed to do, it's exactly what it's supposed to do, it doesn't pause to ask the question, is this threat reasonable? Is this threat valid? The only question that it's asking is, are we safe? And here's kind of the way that this works. Most of you know that I spend lots of time in coffee shops. And if I park down at the coffee shop that I go to regularly, and as I'm walking across the parking lot to head inside, if all of a sudden I hear a horn behind me or brakes squeal right behind me, immediately, my body reacts to that. When I hear that horn, when I hear those brakes, immediately my chest and my shoulders get tight. For most of us, our arms flex and our fists close. And we're jumping to one side and we don't even know what's happening yet. What's happened is that the amygdala has experienced that, and it sets off a fire alarm that says you could die. And that response happens immediately all through our bodies. It happens a lot faster than our conscious thinking rational brain processes things. It happens in the immediate. And here are a few things that take place, and you can probably identify with these and relate to them. When that sense of danger happens, in the immediate, our heart rate increases, our muscles tighten, our breathing shifts, it becomes more shallow, and it becomes more rapid. In the immediate, in just a fraction of a second, cortisol gets released into our brain and body. And cortisol is a stress hormone that the body releases when it senses danger. And what that cortisol does is it helps us to stay alert and to stay ready to respond. It's what activates that fight, flight, or freeze response. You're probably familiar with that. Something happens that we sense as danger, and we respond with fight, flight, or freeze. what do I need to do to keep myself safe? Now, in small bursts, cortisol is helpful. It's a good thing. Helps to keep us alive. In small bursts, it's helpful. But when that cortisol level stays elevated for too long, it keeps our bodies in survival mode. And our bodies aren't designed to live in that state. And it wears us down. It takes a physical toll on our body, but even maybe more dangerous is it takes a mental toll on our body. And as these things are taking place, as the heart rate is increasing, our muscles are tightening, our breathing is becoming accelerated and shallow, the cortisol is being released. As all these things are happening, our prefrontal cortex, and we're going to talk about that a little bit more in a minute, how that operates, but our prefrontal cortex, our rational brain, goes offline. Some friends of mine, they will put their hand up here and they'll throw their fingers up and they'll talk about, we flip our lid. And when that happens, that prefrontal cortex goes offline and we're no longer thinking rationally. And we do things that later, even as we think about it, we think to ourselves, what in the world was I thinking? And then we realize, oh, I wasn't. I was in that fight, flight, or freeze mode. And when those things happen, we respond in a lot of different ways. We can become more aggressive. We can shut down in that freeze response. We can overreact. All of a sudden, we're activated and we're ready to fight. In some more simpler ways, it can be that we snatch our phone and we start to scroll. And what we're doing there with that response is we're looking for an escape. It can be that we snap at our spouse, but we feel the urgency to do something. We need to do something. And it's a built-in self-defense mechanism where we're trying to protect ourselves from what we're experiencing as a threat, whether that's a physical threat, a psychological or emotional threat. Our brain, the amygdala, doesn't differentiate between those things, between physical threats and psychological and emotional threats. It just all registers as danger. Now let's talk for a minute about the prefrontal cortex. This is the frontal lobes of our brain. And when we think about that, we can think about that prefrontal cortex as being the wise adult, that part of us that does smart things. The prefrontal cortex is a logic. It's our ability to think things through rationally and to have a clear look at what's taking place. Think about discernment, which is the ability to accurately perceive the truth. So, for instance, our brain says danger, and the amygdala isn't determining whether the danger is actual or what kind of danger it is. If our prefrontal cortex is able to stay activated, our prefrontal cortex might tell us, oh, don't get so excited. This isn't a big deal. But remember, a lot of the time when we get activated in that danger mode, that prefrontal cortex goes offline and it stops functioning. The prefrontal cortex is where we experience things like empathy, being able to understand what other people are experiencing. And the prefrontal cortex controls things like long-term thinking, like recognizing that, yeah, there might be a small threat in the present, but in the long term, it's not a big deal. It's nothing to get excited about. But we're not able to think that through when that prefrontal cortex goes offline. And it goes offline when that danger alarm is loud, when it's triggered in a big way. And so for us to be able to maintain sobriety, to continue to operate and function in our recovery, that requires us having the ability to strengthen the pause between the alarm and the action. Now, think again about when you're out there walking, maybe you're in the crosswalk headed across the street and a horn goes off, and immediately your body jumps. You respond to that. And there's nothing wrong with that. That's a built-in self-defense mechanism. But some of us go to the extreme. Our body jerks, and at the same time, we automatically draw back to swing. That's not a wise move. And so what we need to do is we need that alarm going off needs to push us to observe what's going on, but we need to train ourselves to pause between the alarm and the action. We need to pause so that we can identify what's taking place before we take action. So, a question then, a logical question for us is, what do we encounter regularly, probably even daily, that feels unsafe for us? And I'm going to give you a list of some things, and I want you to think about this, because a lot of times we don't recognize those things that trigger a sense of unsafety. Sorry there, need a drink. Coffee. So, what are some examples of things that feel unsafe in our life and that can trigger that alarm system? Well, there are all kinds of things that can play into that. It can be news feeds that we watch. Let me tell you something about the news. News today, a lot of news feeds today, the majority of things today are built on an idea of profit. What's going to keep people coming back? What's going to allow us to make money? And so news alerts feed a sense of fear and sometimes promote a worst case scenario. I've been hearing all kinds of things this week. I heard from people early in the week or early last week, before the week's over, we're going to be at war with Iran. Now, that might be on the way. There are some things taking place there. But it's been more than a week since since I started getting those messages, and we're not at war yet. But it's pushed as if it could happen immediately. So things like news alerts about war, about immigration, that's a big trigger for a lot of people right now, about violence. Another one that I hear about all the time is political arguments. In politics, again, anger and fear keep people coming back and keep people activated. And so in political scenarios, everything is presented to us as if that party we disagree with has any kind of influence and control, our country's going to come to an end. And that's the exact same scenario that's presented by every party that's out there. We have two primary parties here in the United States, but both of them are pushing that same scenario. And it triggers that sense of fear and of not being safe. There's all kinds of, especially here in the last few years, I'm running into and working with a lot of people that end up telling me politics, man, politics and news feeds have been behind a lot of my relapse and a lot of my struggle. It can be things like financial uncertainty. A bill's coming due next month, so we worry about it today. Now, we do need to think about it today, maybe, but we don't need to work ourselves into a frenzy. It could be health concerns. It could be tension in our relationship. Have you ever, you arrive home from work or your spouse arrives home from work, and just the look that's on their face causes a physical reaction inside of you. Oh no, they're in a bad mood. And they haven't even said anything or done anything yet. But it triggers that sense of unsafety, things like that. Our brain responds, danger, like pulling a fire alarm. Or maybe you receive a text from a spouse or a parent, and all the text says is call me. And our brain immediately goes to an unhealthy place. Oh no, what's wrong? What have they discovered? Silence from somebody that's important. We shoot a text and we don't get an immediate response. And so our brain goes to, oh, they don't like me anymore. All kinds of things. Criticism at work. Here's the key to this and the point to this. Our brain doesn't evaluate context in these situations. For instance, when we send that text and we don't get an immediate response, our brain doesn't by nature go to, oh, well, they might be busy. They might be with a client or something along those lines. It goes to, oh, they're ignoring me. They don't want to talk to me anymore. Our brain doesn't evaluate context. It just flags threat. And it processes it and experiences it as a threat. And there are all kinds of other things that can trigger that sense of threat. For instance, loneliness. We feel some loneliness. And that can be triggered by all kinds of things. For instance, I'm single, I'm divorced. And loneliness can set off that alarm inside of me. Oh no, I'm going to be by myself for the rest of my life. I've talked in the past about how my brain used to work. When I first got out of prison and I was living in this little dump of an apartment, didn't have much of an income, concerned that everybody out there hated me because I'd been to prison. And my brain, this is the way I operate. My brain would go to places. I'd be sitting there in my apartment by myself, and my brain would go down this rabbit trail. Man, you could sit here this evening and have a heart attack, and nobody would even miss you until your body started to smell. Now, that's some sick thinking, isn't it? I know. That's sick thinking. But our brain gets activated and triggered. Oh no, danger. And it moves to worst case scenario. Loneliness can trigger that. Shame triggers us in intense, unhealthy ways, or even just being misunderstood. All of these things register in our brains as unsafe. What are your thoughts about that? You can shoot something in the comments, or if you're watching later, shoot something in the comments, and if I see it, I'd be happy to respond and get back to you. But I'm interested in knowing what you have identified. What kind of things trigger you? What kind of things register in your brain as being unsafe and can set you down an unhealthy spiral? Um, for a lot of us that are in recovery, shame equals threat. That idea. Everybody's always going to believe the worst. Yeah, Blast, I see that. Politics for sure, man. You and I have talked about that some in the past. Politics have historically been a big trigger for me. And man, in the long haul, a lot of those things that set me off don't really mean anything to anybody. And I've had to really eliminate a lot of those political feeds and had to pull away from that. Shame gets registered as a threat. I'm always going to be a failure, or I'm always going to be seen as a failure. Exposure gets processed as a big time threat. I was, while in active addiction, I was also in ministry. And there'd be times I'd be speaking in a church or in front of a group of people. And right in the middle of speaking, my brain would go down this rabbit hole with shame and exposure mixed. They don't have any idea what I was doing last night. And if they did know, man, I'd lose my job. They'd throw me out of here. Nobody in this building would ever speak to me again. Shame and exposure. For those of us in recovery, that can be registered as threat and activate that defense mechanism, that fight, flight, or freeze response. Sometimes intimacy can do that. Now, we got to be careful when we talk about intimacy that we don't immediately automatically connect that to sex. Intimacy really more correctly just has to do with relationship. A safe place. I want to be with you. You want to be with me. No fear of shame, no fear of judgment. But intimacy. We become afraid of our spouse or our partner. For a lot of us who have lived in addiction, that terrifies us. If they really knew me, they'd leave me. They wouldn't want anything to do with me. A way that has played out for me in the past, if anybody initiated interaction, somebody walked up and started a discussion. Hey, Ron, how are you doing? My immediate thought was, all right, what do you want? What are you after? Intimacy equaled threat. Maybe you can relate to that. And I want to tell you, most of the time, that's false. Most of the time, that's false. Now, why does this matter in recovery? This idea of the things that we experience and that we process as unsafe. Why is this important to us in recovery? When we feel unsafe, what's being activated there is a fear response. That's what that fight, flight, or freeze response is. It is a reaction to fear. And one of the most common responses to fear, when we feel unsafe, when we experience fear, one of the most common responses is to seek control. And that control can take all kinds of behaviors and roots in our life. For instance, when we feel unsafe and we seek control, it can mean that we push towards isolation. We limit our vulnerability with the people around us. That can be an attempt at control. Control may mean that we puff up and we emotionally or physically attempt to take control. We become aggressive. We are experiencing fear. There was a position that I had in the work world in the past, and where I was in management over production in a plant. And when fear was activated, when I was afraid that we weren't going to make a shipment or something that was going to cause me to look bad, when that fear was triggered, I went for control. I became really active out on the floor. I stood up tall, and I'm already a big guy, and I began to speak to people in condescending ways. I became a little more aggressive and a little more forceful. It was an attempt to seek control. It was a response to that fight, flight, or freeze response. Another way that we respond when we feel unsafe is we seek soothing. We seek to soothe or to comfort ourselves. And a third thing that we turn to is we seek certainty. And again, that's connected and related to that idea of control. We want to feel a sense of certainty. And when we move to these things, when we desire and seek control, when we seek soothing, when we seek certainty, what does that typically look like for us? Well, for a lot of us, that can mean that we turn to things like food. Are you one of those people that when you get stressed, you park your butt in front of the TV with a family-sized bag of chips and you eat the whole thing by yourself? It can turn to food, to stress eating. It can turn to gaming. I know people that when they're experiencing anxiety and fear, there are people that I know that go on all-night gaming binges. And then they find themselves trying to work the next day and they've never been to bed. It can mean things like alcohol or drugs. And we're using that to numb out the fear and to seek to soothe ourselves. It can be porn and sex. It can be anger. It can be isolation. We just try to isolate and shut down all stimulation, but that doesn't work in the real world either. It can be political obsession. And that might play out in ways like surrounding ourselves with people that think the exact same way that we do. And we surround ourselves with that, and all of a sudden, even when unhealthy things are present, we don't see it because everybody around us is saying and thinking and doing the same thing. It can be doom scrolling, and here's the thing: is that we tell ourselves, I'm dysregulated, I'm scared. We might not recognize that consciously because that frontal lobe is offline, but that's what we're experiencing. And so our response is, I have to occupy myself with something, and it turns into doom scrolling. That's where things like the gaming becomes a thing. We're trying to fill up all of our empty time. And there are times when that can be a short-term answer, but that's never a healthy long-term answer for us. Now, the reason we turn to these things, we need to be careful here, is not because we're bad. We don't turn to these things because we're just by nature bad people. We turn to these behaviors because we're dysregulated and we don't know how to respond in a healthy way. Maybe that's never been demonstrated for us. A lot of these things go back to things like attachment and examples that we had set for us in our family. Maybe in our family, we saw when mom and dad get dysregulated, they withdraw and isolate. They shut down emotionally. Or when they get dysregulated, they drink. Or when they get dysregulated, they just eat constantly. And we learn how to regulate ourselves based on what we see in other people. That's the way it works a lot of times. So we don't turn to these things because we're bad or because we're dysregulated. Don't hear anything that I'm saying as being an attempt to shame you, because that's not what it is. Most of the time, relapse starts with, back to what we started with tonight, I don't feel safe. And that relapse starts from that place. How can I feel safe? So I want to take our last little bit here and I want to talk about how to regulate and reset. And I want to walk through a few simple, repeatable tools that can be beneficial. And as I'm walking through this, if there are tools that you're using that you've recognized help you, stick those in the comments. I'm interested in hearing about them. So let's start. Tool number one. When we that sense of not being safe, that dysregulation activates, we pause and we name it. And it can be something as simple as a statement like, something in me feels unsafe right now. It can be a simple statement like, I'm feeling stress or anxiety. It may be, many of you know that in my daily check-in routine, my regular check-in routine, my first question is, what am I feeling? And so in naming it, we may pause and say, what am I feeling right now? Something feels unsafe in me. And why is that important that we name it? It's because, remember, we said back in the beginning, when the amygdala activates and that alarm bell gets pulled, it's like pulling a fire alarm on the wall. Our prefrontal cortex, our rational brain, goes offline. And at least in part, stops operating well. And when we pause to name what we're feeling, what we're experiencing, even if it is a general, vague identification, when we pause to name it, that simple step begins to reactivate that frontal lobe and to bring it back online so that we can begin to think in a more rational manner. So, step number one, tool number one, is name what's happening and what you're experiencing. Number two, reorient to the present. When we kick into that fear mode, a lot of times we catastrophize and we begin to imagine what the future is going to be like. If we can, in that pause, as our frontal cortex is coming back online, if we can orient to the present, if we can just look around, what's going on around me? In that moment, in that second, name 5 things that you can see. What do I see? If I'm in the parking lot and that horn has gone off behind me, I see maybe that somebody was backing out in front of a car. The horn didn't have anything to do with me at all. I see the coffee shop I'm headed to. I begin to name things that I see around me in the present, right now. Begin to pay attention to sounds. What are you hearing? Feel your feet. Now that sounds strange. Really what you want to do is feel your body. But my feet, I say feel my feet because my feet are on the ground. The ground's not shaking. The ground's stable. And for me, when I feel my feet and I recognize, oh, wait a minute, there's no earthquake taking place, that helps to ground me. That continues to bring that prefrontal cortex back online. So number one is name it. Name what you're experiencing. Name what you're feeling. Number two, reorient to the present and to what's happening right now. Signal to your brain that there's no immediate threat. And then number three, this is a tool that I use at some point every day. Slow your breathing. Slow your breathing. A type of breathing, box breathing, there are all kinds of different breathing techniques. But here's what that looks like. You remember I said when that amygdala engages, when that safety alarm, that fire alarm goes off in your brain, our body tenses, our arms tighten, a lot of times our fists clench, our heart rate increases, blood pressure climbs, and breathing becomes rapid and shallow. We need to begin to take deep breaths. And there's a specific way that needs to look. We breathe in through our nose, deep, long breaths. Maybe inhale for a count of 4, a deep breath. Hold that breath for the count of 4. And then exhale, and exhale just a little bit slower. I inhaled for the count of 4, held for the count of 4. Exhale for a count of maybe 6 to 8. And when you exhale, exhale through your mouth. Now there's a reason for that. There's a reason why breathing is so important. And in fact, I will tell you that there is not another tool available for us that has more research behind it that affirms what it does and that it works than that tool of breathing. In through our nose, out through our mouth, a deep breath, that long exhale tells my nervous system, it tells my amygdala, that part of my brain that's pulled the fire alarm, it tells my brain, wait a minute, Ron's not taking those deep or those slow, or gee, I'm losing all my words, those rapid, shallow breaths. Ron's not doing that. That means that he thinks that he's in a safe place. And just that action begins to communicate to our brain and to our body, I'm in a safe place. And with that, my breathing begins on its own to slow. My heart rate begins to slow. My blood pressure begins to drop. And my body begins to relax. Through a simple tool, breathing, I'm communicating to myself, I'm in a safe place. And I'm shutting down that fear response, that fight, flight, or freeze reaction. I'm shutting that down. Now, I know that that sounds simple. I know it sounds too good to be true. And I'll be honest with you, for the majority of my life, people told me, Ron, you need to slow down and take a deep breath. And internally, occasionally I said it out loud, but most of the time I said it in my head. Yeah, it's hippy dippy new age crap. You don't know what you're talking about. But when I began to put it into practice, I began to recognize the truth behind what was being communicated to me. I began to experience de-escalation. I began to experience regulation. And I developed a new tool that I could use to soothe and to calm myself. I learned how to communicate to my brain and to my body, I am in a safe place. Now, step number 4, reduce input. Now, again, what a lot of us think, what we've trained ourselves is when I'm triggered, when I'm activated, it just means I've got too much free time. And so we try to do something to fill that free time. We try to make ourselves busy. We go to a game, we start to doom scroll. But what needs to take place is we need to reduce input, not increase it. We need to turn off the news. We need to put down our phone and stop the scrolling. We need to stop arguing online, and we need to step away from politics. We need to control our exposure, reduce input, and use these tools to calm ourselves. Breathe. Turn on some relaxing music, something that we find comfortable, something that can give us a sense of peace. Calm ourselves. What happens is when we increase information, whether it's through the news, through turning on the TV, whether it's through scrolling a news feed, scrolling social media, when we begin to bombard ourselves with information without regulation, this increases agitation in our brains and in our bodies. And it escalates the deregulation. We think that it's doing the opposite, and it's not. It's driving us closer and closer to that ledge of relapse. We need to de-escalate and to calm ourselves. And then number 5, we're about to wind down here. Number 5 is connection. We need connection. Regulation happens in relationship. We can borrow regulation from people around us. Is there anybody in your life that when you're just around them, when you're talking to them, you just automatically begin to feel calmer? You begin to feel just more pleasant, more connected with yourself. We can borrow regulation from healthy people around us. We need that connection. We might take the step that 12 steps and meetings talk about of picking up that 500-pound telephone, which is so hard for us, and make a call. Talk to somebody. For me, you guys know my relationship with coffee shops. When I am dysregulated, when I'm agitated, a lot of times I head to the coffee shop. I have one coffee shop I go to most of the time. I've got another one that kind of fills in on the weekends some. But that primary coffee shop I've been going to for years. And from the moment I walk in the door, it's kind of like, some of you won't even remember this, but there used to be a TV show, Cheers. It was about a bar in Boston. And as soon as a patron walked through the door, they would call out his name. There used to be a guy that would come in all the time, Norm. And as soon as he would come in the door, everybody in the bar would holler, Norm! When I walk into the coffee shop that I normally go to, I've been going there for a long time. And one or two of the baristas, as I come through the door, immediately when I step in, hey, Ron, they speak to me. And I get my coffee and I sit down at a table. Maybe I begin to read. Maybe I begin to listen to a meditation. And when I read, it's not a news feed. It is a devotional or a meditation, a blog on recovery and on tools. And almost always when as I'm sitting there in that coffee shop, because I've been going there for years, somebody that I know will come in and out and we'll speak to one another. And I become regulated through relationship. So we call somebody, we go someplace where we feel comfortable, and we tell the truth. Here's an important thing. Have you ever had somebody ask you, hey, how are you feeling today? And without even thinking, you respond, great. When inside you're totally dysregulated, I would invite you to tell the truth. There are times when I'm sitting there in the coffee shop and somebody comes in and they ask, how are you doing, Ron? And I'm honest. I don't immediately jump into all kinds of details, but I tell them, well, I've been feeling a little dysregulated. I came in here to unwind. And sometimes that's as far as the conversation goes. Occasionally, somebody sits down and we talk for a few minutes. Or maybe it's a person who I consider to be a close friend and we talk a little more in depth. But just that simple step, if it's just me making that statement, I've been feeling a little dysregulated and I came in here to kind of unwind. And that's as far as it goes. The conversation ends there. That simple step of honesty about what I'm experiencing and what I'm feeling helps to regulate me. It begins to get that stress out of my body and it helps to regulate. So, those 5 steps again, really quick. When we find ourselves in that fight, flight, or freeze mode, that sense of being unsafe gets triggered in us, start by naming it. Something in me feels unsafe, or maybe here's what I'm feeling right now in the present. Look to orient to the present. Don't let your mind spiral on what might happen in 20 minutes or tomorrow or next week or next month. Look around. Focus on things in the present right now. Send a signal to your brain there's no immediate threat. Slow your breathing. That takes deliberate action. In through your nose, count of 4. Out through your mouth for the count of maybe 6 to 8. That communicates to your brain, oh, Ron doesn't see danger. Ron thinks he's in a safe place. And my body and my brain begin to respond to that. Reduce input. Don't automatically assume, well, you're experiencing this because you've got too much free time. Turn off the news. Put down the phone. Turn off the gaming console. Don't look to argue with somebody. Limit your exposure. Maybe add some calming music. Breathe for a few minutes. Don't bombard yourself with information. Information, when we are not regulated, leads to increased agitation. And then the last, look for connection. Regulation happens in connection. Call somebody. Go to a place that's comfortable for you. Might be a coffee shop. I've got a friend that goes to a cigar bar. It may be that you just get out of the house and go for a 5-minute walk. It can be that simple. Look for connection. The world may not feel safe, but we have to be careful that our body doesn't live in constant alarm. We can retrain our nervous system. We can strengthen that pause between when that alarm bell gets pulled and when we respond or we react. And we have the ability to become calm in the midst of chaos. Now, let me close with a couple questions for you, and we'll shut things down for tonight. What in your life has felt unsafe recently? And what do you notice your go-to soothing strategy to be? Do you start to doom scroll? Do you go on a gaming binge? Do you take a little drink to calm your nerves? Do you turn to pornography and masturbation? Do you engage in a political fight? What is your go-to soothing strategy? And look to change that and to put some healthy tools to work in your life. Again, feel free. This will be posted on my social media platforms. Feel free, if you're watching this later, that's where most of my views come, feel free to post in the comments. Let me know what you think about what I'm saying, and let me know what tools you have found to work for you as you regulate and turn off that fire alarm that's going off in your head. All right, have a good evening, and the guests will begin in a couple weeks. I'm looking forward to some of the discussions we'll be having here as we move forward. Have a good evening, everybody.